May 14th, 1887 began at 38 degrees in Copper Flat and smelled like hot iron by noon. By 4 o'clock, the air over the New Mexico flats had climbed past 85, and the creek that usually talked in a dry whisper now sounded like freight in a tunnel. It came down out of the Sangre ridges thick and gray, shouldering branches, dead grass, and one whole cottonwood limb that turned slowly in the current, like a drowned man's arm. On the west side of town, the private dam threw a clean shadow across the water line, and 3 powder kegs sat under canvas where no powder kegs should have been in spring runoff. Amanda Preston reined in on the road cut above the arroyo and held still long enough to feel the ground. It trembled now and then under wagon traffic from the mine, but this vibration came in pulses, as if somebody was testing charges in stone. Below her, Copper Flat glittered with fresh windows and bad judgment. The banker's brick front stood fat and proud in the low ground. The mayor's feed warehouse had expanded right to the edge of the drainage bend. New corrals crowded the floodplain because dry seasons had run long and people had mistaken luck for a promise. She took out her notebook, wrote the date, temperature, wind out of the south-southwest at 10 to 12 miles by her estimate, and the simple line she had learned to trust more than prayers. Runoff high plus blasting near face equals town at risk. Then she put the notebook away and rode down toward Main Street with a sheriff's star on her vest and dust whitening her buckskins. No one looked relieved to see her. The first laugh came from 2 drovers outside the saloon. One tipped his hat and called, "Afternoon, Pine Wolf girl. You lose your trap line?" Another said, "Judge gone soft if this is law now." They were not original men. Copper Flat had been saying versions of the same thing for 3 weeks, ever since Territorial Judge Wilmer signed her appointment papers in Santa Fe and sent her south with formal authority and an informal warning. They don't want order. They want a figurehead. Don't let them choose what kind of sheriff you are. At 26, Amanda had shoulders corded from mountain work and a face most folks first read as plain until she fixed them with those pale, unblinking eyes. She wore no skirt in the saddle, no lace cuffs, no city hat. Just buckskin coat, hat brim gone soft at the edges, Colt at her hip, rifle in the scabbard, and a saddlebag that made men laugh harder than the Star did. In the left bag, weather notes, a brass thermometer wrapped in cloth, folded basin maps, 2 law books with water-warped corners and deed abstracts, copied in her own hand. In the right, 6 pounds of drought-hardy seed grain, 3 packets of onion starts for widow gardens, 2 pounds of nails, lamp oil, waxed twine, and hard biscuit. "Sheriff carries groceries now?" a blacksmith called as she dismounted near the jail office. "Sheriff carries what keeps people alive," she said. He snorted and went back to his anvil. She had lived too long off weather and winter to mistake mockery for danger. Mockery was wind. It could sting, but it passed unless somebody with money fed it. Danger was patterns. At 12 years old, Amanda Preston had found her father half buried in a late blizzard north of Taos Pass, one glove off, fingers blue where he had tried to strike flint in sleet. He had been a trapper, trail guide, and a man who believed luck belonged only to the prepared. By then, he had already drilled 3 rules into her so often she heard them in her sleep. Cash before hunger. Dig runoff channels before rain. Trust records as much as rifle sights. She survived that first year because of those rules. She remembered prying open the stone cache he had shown her in summer. Jerked venison, beans, coffee, 2 candles, 1 jar of tallow. She remembered cutting narrow diversion ditches around their line shack with a hand shovel too big for her shoulders, so spring melt wouldn't undercut the posts. She remembered him making her copy, fur tallies and supply debts by lantern light, making her write each number twice, and then check it against inventory because, as he said, a liar can charm a jury. Ink can hang him. No schoolhouse taught her that. Hard country did. By 16, she could read cloud levels better than most teamsters, shoot straight enough to knock a coyote at 70 paces, and calculate how much flour a household would need to bridge an early freeze. By 20, she had driven relief wagons after a cholera wave and watched men die not from sickness first, but from panic and empty shelves. By 24, she had worked as a deputy clerk 2 counties over and discovered that land theft wore polished boots and signed itself in fountain pen. So when Judge Wilmer asked if she would take Copper Flat after Sheriff Kearney was knifed behind the livery and no one dared name who paid for it, she said yes before he finished the question. He had offered her a guard detail. She had asked for copies of mining permits instead. Now, 3 weeks into the job, she sat in the one-room sheriff's office, a desk, a gun rack, a stove that smoked wrong, and spread her notes across the plank table, while outside, town laughter rose and fell like flies. Copper Flat called itself prosperous. On paper, it was strangling. She had begun with ordinary lawman work, jail log reconciliations, cattle theft reports, drifter warrants. But every trail bent toward the same handful of names. Mayor Elias Crowder signed emergency appropriations for road repairs never completed. Banker Silas Pike issued tax lien notes against ranches that had no delinquency on county rolls. Mine foreman Boone Kells had permits for 2 legal blasts at the upper seam, and powder receipts enough for 10. Acting Deputy Harlan Voss filed complaints that disappeared once paid men visited witnesses at night. Individually, each irregularity could hide in dust. Together, they formed a map. Amanda started making her own record system because the town's official one had holes big enough to drop a family through. She ruled ledger pages into 5 columns: property, claim date, lien date, transfer date, witness. She added a 6th for source document and marked every copied item with a pinprick code in the corner. 1 hole for courthouse book, 2 for bank abstract, 3 for assay office duplicate. So if anyone swapped pages, she could still identify origin. She bought cheap school copybooks at 18 cents each and filled 11 in 10 days. She also treated flood risk like an open case file. At dawn, she measured creek rise against a marked willow stake she drove near the ford. Plus 3 inches on Monday, plus 7 by Wednesday, then a jump of 11 after an afternoon warm wind off the south face. She paid a Navajo sheep herder 1 silver dime for snowline reports every other day from the eastern slopes. Drifts still shoulder high in shaded cuts where they should have been knee-deep by mid-May. She walked the old spill ditches north of town and measured silt depth with her boot knife. Most were clogged with years of neglect and 1 deliberate berm thrown up to divert water away from the mayor's warehouse and toward worker cabins downhill. She bought tools from the hardware on credit because the town council had delayed releasing her office budget. Shovel, long handle, $1.10. 2 mattocks, $2.40. Total 50 feet hemp line, 60 cents. 1 keg 10-penny nails, $1.85. Red calico bolt, 20 yards, $3. Planning a barn dance, Sheriff? The storekeeper asked as he wrapped the cloth. Planning to be able to find high ground in the dark, she said. That same afternoon, she hired 3 boys from the stable for 25 cents each, and a hot meal apiece to clear 1 block ditch behind St. Bridget's Mission. They moved 32 wheelbarrow loads of silt and trash, mostly broken bottles and rusted cans. At 5 feet wide and 2 feet deep, the channel could carry enough overflow to spare maybe a dozen homes, maybe more if the water came hard. Widow Cora Bell watched from her porch and asked if there was danger. There's always danger, Amanda said. Question is whether we meet it early or late. Town says you see wolves in daylight. Town is welcome to keep sleeping. Cora spat into the dust, then handed over 2 extra hands by evening. Her nephews, raw-boned and eager, who worked until dark without complaint. Resistance came faster from men with offices. Mayor Crowder summoned Amanda to council chambers on her 9th day and smiled with all his teeth. "People are unsettled by your methods," he said. "This is a commercial district, not a military post. Digging ditches through private parcels without authorization. Drainage easements were granted in '73 and renewed in '81, Amanda said, tapping a copy on his desk. "Signed by your predecessor." Crowder's smile thinned. "You are here to keep peace, not to meddle in engineering." "I'm here to keep people breathing," she said. He dismissed her with a wave meant for servants. Banker Pike tried charm. He invited her to inspect his vault books over coffee, talked about civic confidence, suggested she ought to spend less time with creek mud and superstitions, and more with social leaders. She asked why 3 widows had tax liens dated 2 months before assessment notices were issued. His cup paused halfway to his mouth. "Clerical compression. Clerical fraud," she said, and left him staring. Acting Deputy Voss tried threat wrapped in concern. "Roads get lonely after dusk," he told her outside the jail. "Be a pity if your horse stepped in a badger hole." "Be a pity if your statement logs got compared to witness marks," she said. "Ink remembers." By week 3, Amanda had mapped the whole town in graphite on butcher paper pinned to her office wall. Elevations, culverts, privy pits, corral fences, schoolhouse, mission, Chinese laundry row, mine road, dam spur, and every household with children under 10. She marked each with tiny codes for mobility: cart, wagon, no transport, an estimated evacuation time by foot from each block. She did this at night by lamp until the wick burned low and her eyes sanded raw. She wasn't building prestige. She was building options. On the morning of May 15th, she rode to the assay office under the pretense of checking ore transport manifests. The clerk, a nervous man named Tilson, had ink stains on both cuffs and fear in the corners of his mouth. She asked for quarter ledgers. He gave her summary books. "I need originals," she said. "Those are with Foreman Kells." "Then we'll wait." Tilson shifted, glanced toward the rear room, then reached under the counter and produced a narrow ledger bound in cracked green cloth. "Only this one. Nothing else." Amanda opened it and felt the world narrow to page lines. Entries tied ore shipments to parcel transfers. Parcel transfers matched tax liens she had already flagged as impossible. Beside 2 of those lines were notation marks she had seen in Pike's books. Beside 3 more, coded payout amounts with initials EC, SP, HV. Bribes paid from stability reserves. One margin note in a different hand read, "Blast delay impossible. After inspector notice. Must settle before surge." She copied the page numbers on her cuff before Tilson could change his mind. "Who wrote this note?" she asked. Tilson swallowed. "I don't know." "Don't lie by habit. It'll get you killed by someone richer than me." He said nothing. She closed the ledger gently as if it were explosive and asked for receipt paper. He hesitated. She laid down her badge and revolver on the counter, plain in sight. "By authority of territorial office," she said, voice flat. "I am seizing this record as evidence in active fraud investigation. You can make me drag it out in chains, or you can sign a lawful transfer and sleep tonight." His hand shook as he signed. Outside, a wagon rattled toward the mine road carrying powder under tarp. Amanda watched it go, counted the kegs by shape and bounce, then tied the seized ledger into wax canvas and slipped it into her saddlebag between law book and seed grain. For the first time since taking the Star, she felt the town tip from contempt toward something sharper. She mounted up and rode for the jail to issue warrants before word ran ahead of her. She reached the jail at a hard trot, hitched and carried the wax-wrapped ledger inside like a coal she did not intend to drop. Acting Deputy Harlan Voss was at her desk, boots up, reading last week's Santa Fe New Mexican as if he owned the chair. He did not stand when she entered. "You're in my seat," Amanda said. "You're late for supper is what you are." His eyes moved to the saddlebag in her hand. "Hear you been rummaging offices without a warrant." She set the bag down, untied the wrap, and opened the green ledger to the marked page. "I'm writing warrants now. Boone Kells for deed fraud, tax line falsification conspiracy, and criminal endangerment tied to unauthorized blasting near the dam. Pike and Crowder pending corroboration on payment trails." Voss gave the page one lazy glance, then laughed. "That chicken scratch could be anybody's. It matches Pike's notation hooks and assay transfer dates. I have duplicates from county abstracts." "Do you?" She pulled the warrant book toward her. Voss put his boot on it. "You don't get to block process," she said. He leaned forward. "I do if process keeps peace. You want to arrest the mine foreman on payday eve? You'll have 200 men in the street before lamps are lit. Then we'll have 200 witnesses when I read charges." Outside, voices swelled. Wagon brakes squealed. Someone shouted her name with the rough cheer men use before a fistfight. Voss smiled without warmth. "Too late. Your fan club's here." By the time she stepped onto the boardwalk, Main Street had thickened shoulder to shoulder. Drovers, teamsters, mine hands still gray with dust, clerks with clean cuffs, and Mayor Crowder in his good vest beside Banker Pike, both wearing civic concern like church hats. Boone Kells stood just behind them, arms folded, jaw set. Crowder raised his hands. Folks, calm. Sheriff Preston appears to have taken private business records from the assay office and now threatens lawful employers with baseless arrests. Amanda held up the ledger. "This is evidence seized with signature receipt. Tilson can confirm." A voice from the back yelled, "Tilson says she forced him at gunpoint." She didn't turn her head, but she saw Pike watching the crowd instead of her, measuring. Kells stepped forward half a pace. "You accuse me. Say it plain." "I accuse you of fraud and of planning blast work at a stressed dam during peak melt." Laughter broke like a dropped crate. "Dam's solid," someone barked. "Creek always runs high in spring." "Pine Wolf sees ghosts in mud." Amanda waited until the noise thinned. "You have powder staged on west abutment. 3 kegs under canvas yesterday. 1 wagon more this morning. Your permits cover upper seam only." Kells spread his hands. "Seam charges. Stored where dry. You want to inspect? Bring a mining inspector, not fairy tales." "Inspector is due in 8 days," Amanda said. "That margin note in this ledger says you can't delay blast after notice. Settle before surge. Whose handwriting is that, Boone?" He shrugged, almost bored. "Can't read half what clerks scribble." Crowder's voice sharpened. "Sheriff Preston, hand over that ledger while this is reviewed by counsel." "No." Pike stepped in smoothly. "Then for town stability, we request temporary suspension of your authority until Judge Wilmer can be consulted." "You don't request suspension from men you're under investigation for." Voss moved behind her, quick as a snake, and before she shifted he had unpinned her star. Not ripped, worse, just plucked, as if correcting an error in clothing. The crowd gave a low animal sound of approval. "By Citizens Committee authority," Voss announced. "Amanda Preston is relieved pending inquiry." "No such authority exists," Amanda said, loud and clear. "That badge is territorial." A bottle shattered near her horse's forefeet. Somebody fired a shot into the dirt 6 inches from the hitch rail. Her mare reared, iron striking sparks. Crowder lifted both palms like a peacemaker. No violence. We simply ask Miss Preston to leave town until this misunderstanding settles. Another shot clipped the brim of her hat and sent Felt spinning. That was answer enough. Amanda backed to her horse without turning her spine, mounted in one motion and rode out through curses and clapping, past the cottonwoods where shadows stretched long across the road. At the edge of town, she looked back once. Voss held her star up between two fingers, grinning. She kept riding until Copper Flat dropped below the ridgeline, and the old line shack came into view, half buried in rabbit brush and memory. She unsaddled in the dark, barred the door, and lit one lamp. Then she worked. She spread 3 maps on the table: basin contour, property plat, and her own street grid with elevations penciled from boot-level estimates. She added fresh numbers by lantern: creek rise at Willow Stake, plus 21 inches in 4 days. Snowline reports: still deep north faces, rapid south face melt. Wind shift this evening, southerly warm pulse sustained after sunset. She drew the dam and shaded the town below with hatch marks by risk: black for direct channel strike, crosshatch for sidewash, dots for secondary ponding behind warehouses and corrals. Then she did what her father taught when fear wanted to gallop: break panic into tasks. Task 1: warning routes. She cut the red calico into strips 12 inches long, doubled them and stitched quick loops with waxed twine so they could be tied one-handed on fence posts in the dark. 62 strips made 1 sack. She made 2 sacks. Task 2: flow reduction. From memory and old survey notes, she listed 6 historic spill cuts that once fed overflow toward shallow gravel fans north of town. 4 were blocked. 1 had been bermed. 1 might still run if opened at the mouth. She wrote estimated labor: Mission rear ditch, reopen 80 feet, depth 2 feet, width 3 feet. Laundry row side run, clear trash gate, remove barrel barricade, cottonwood bend cut, breach mare's private berm at 2 points, livery back channel, pull fence rails for crossflow. Task 3: evacuation timing. She took her household list and marked red circles around homes with infants, invalids, or no wagon. 38 addresses. She paired each with nearest high ground route and walking minutes in dry conditions, then added 30% for mud, 20% for darkness. Worst case from farthest cabin to ridge path, 44 minutes. Task 4: proof distribution. Evidence mattered if she lived. Evidence mattered more if she didn't. She pulled her tin box from beneath the bunk, copied deeds, receipt stubs, witness statements she had collected quietly for 2 weeks, and built packets wrapped in oilcloth, each with 3 core pages: forged transfer chain, payment trace, and map excerpt showing floodplain theft links. She made 20 packets before midnight, 37 by 2, 48 by dawn. Every 5 packets, she paused to step outside and read sky. High clouds shredded east to west. Air smelled of wet stone, though no rain had fallen on the flats. From somewhere down basin came a muted boom, not thunder, too regular for rockfall. Test charges. At first light, she saddled, loaded tools, cloth, packets, and 2 canteens, and rode back down. She did not use Main Street. She came in behind the Potter's yard, tied off in an alley, and started at St. Bridget's. Father Ortega opened the side door in shirt sleeves. Sleep creased into his face. "You should not be here," he whispered. "They posted men at the square." "I know." She set a sack of red strips and 6 evidence packets on the pew. "Need your bell rope check for free swing. No fray, no knot. If I signal from Dam Road with a green lantern, ring until your arms fail." His brows drew tight. "Signal for what?" "Wall water." He stared one beat, then crossed himself. Madre de Dios. Not yet, she said. Help me keep it that way. By 7, she had Cora Bell's nephews, 2 laundry boys, and one-armed carpenter opening the mission ditch with mattocks. Amanda measured grade with a line and weighted spoon, adjusting slope by inches so water would not undercut the chapel foundation. At 10 feet, she checked flow with a bucket dump. At 30 feet, she corrected sidewall slough by laying scavenged plank as temporary shoring. By 82 feet, muddy water from the alley finally drew and slipped north where it belonged. Again, she said, and sent them to the laundry row cut. By mid-morning, the project had grown legs. A Chinese laundry owner named Lin Wei brought 3 workers and 2 broad shovels. No questions asked. Stable boys hauled out rusted stove parts, blocking the trash gate. Church girls tore old petticoats into extra markers when red cloth ran low. Cora Bell organized a cookpot on her porch and fed anyone who stayed to dig. Amanda posted 1 chalkboard at the mission wall. High route. A. Mission steps to Quarry Road to North Ridge. High route. B. Laundry row to old lime pit path. No carts in narrow cut after dark. She set younger boys to tying red strips every 30 paces at shoulder height so they'd show above splash and lantern glare. She made them walk each route twice, carrying sacks of sand to test footing. Where slope turned slick, she had them scatter cinders from blacksmith sweepings for traction. At noon, she broke the mayor's berm, not with speech, with a shovel and 2 hard swings at the weakest notch, where fresh-packed dirt met older clay. Water nosed through, then widened, then found the old line of the channel and took it like memory. A hired hand from Crowder's warehouse ran up cursing. You got no right. Amanda handed him a folded easement copy. Recorded and renewed. If your boss wants to argue, tell him to bring boots. The hand spat near her feet and backed off when Lin Wei stepped up beside her with his shovel held crosswise. By afternoon, you could stand at the mission corner and see a system where there had been none. Open cuts, marked paths, wagon teams pre-positioned near uphill lanes, and door chalk symbols. 1 slash for children, 2 for bedridden. Circle for extra animals to loose if water hit. It was not pretty, it was enough to matter. Copper Flat answered with ridicule sharpened into policy. A printed notice appeared nailed to the saloon post around 3, signed by Crowder's Citizens Stability Committee. Notice residents are advised to disregard unauthorized alarm claims circulated by former Sheriff A. Preston. Any person aiding unlawful tampering with private embankments or mining operations will be fined. Curfew tonight after 9 o'clock. Gatherings at Mission discouraged. By 4, boys were shouting new rhymes after her in the street. Sheriff of Puddles. Queen of Ditches. Men tipped imaginary stars from their chests and bowed. A butcher refused to sell her salt pork on account of administrative confusion. The telegraph clerk pretended not to see her when she asked if her wire to Santa Fe had gone out. When she reached over the counter for the send ledger, he slapped it shut and said, "Committee business first." She went to the livery for lamp oil. The owner said credit canceled. Who canceled it? Bank instructions. Put it in writing. He looked away. Don't need to. At the well pump, 2 respectable women she had greeted by name for weeks turned their backs as she approached, gathering their skirts as if mud might jump. On Pike's front steps, his wife hosted iced tea for half the town's merchant class and laughed loudly when Amanda passed, saying, "Some people mistake fussing for competence." At dusk, Voss and 3 committee men walked the rows and cut down half her red markers where they could reach. Amanda followed after dark and retied what she could, higher this time, using nails in door lintels and rafters where knives couldn't swipe them without a ladder. She carried a hand drill and made pilot holes fast, neat, and silent. On houses of those openly hostile, she still tied markers at the corner posts. Cora Bell met her in an alley with a split lip and fury in both eyes. Pike's clerk called me carrion for helping. Amanda touched her shoulder once. You done right. They say you're stealing children to march us into hills so your bandits can loot. They say many things. Are we in danger or not? Amanda looked at the sky, then at the creek glow beyond roofs. Yes. Cora nodded as if hearing a price. Then tell me where to stand. By the mission door at moonrise. Bring blankets, no trunks. Trunks drown people. Rumors got meaner by the hour. Somebody chalked Wolf Witch on her old office door. Somebody else pinned a dead jackrabbit to the mission gate with a note. Dig this ditch too. Miners coming off shift shouldered past her on purpose. One muttering, Kearney died cleaner than you'll go. She did not answer. She kept a running list in her pocket of who still cooperated, who needed convincing, who might sabotage. At intervals, she stopped and wrote times next to events. Marker cuts, 7:12 p.m., committee patrol, 8:05. Horses moved from low corrals, 8:40 by unknown hands. Good sign. Church girls relocating hymn books and cots, 9:10. Better. Near 9:30, Mayor Crowder called a public reassurance in front of the bank. Lanterns strung bright. Whiskey passed. Fiddler hired. Crowder climbed a crate and announced that spring runoff was healthy commerce water, that mine blasting was routine and fully supervised, and that anyone spreading panic would answer for losses. He pointed, smiling, at Amanda in the fringe of lamplight. Miss Preston has had a difficult adjustment to civic norms. Let us treat her with Christian patience and avoid encouraging episodes. Laughter rolled big and relieved. Amanda stepped onto the edge of the crate shadow. If you trust your words, ring the dam road and confirm no charges are laid. Crowder spread his hands. Operational details are proprietary. Water isn't proprietary. Voss moved between them and put a palm to her shoulder. Not hard, just patronizing enough for the crowd to enjoy. Go sleep, Amanda. Let grown folks run a town. She removed his hand and walked away before her temper chose for her. The basin gave its own testimony before midnight. First came a sound like distant carts over plank, steady and low, though no road lay up there. Subsurface rumble from heavy flow under thawing crust. Amanda heard it while checking the willow stake. Water now 6 inches above her morning mark, rising faster after dark when it should have slowed. Second came the color change. Lantern light on creek should have flashed brown-green at this stage. Tonight it looked black at the center, gray at the edge, loaded with fresh finds from a recent cut. Not seasonal wash. She cupped it in her palm, cold enough to ache bone, carrying crushed mica and clay that settled slow. New disturbance upstream. Third came seepage below the west dam shoulder. Not spillway overflow. This was a thin fan blooming from a crack line 6 feet down from crest, pulsing in time with muffled shocks. She counted between pulses. 52 seconds. 49. 50. Test blasts had moved from probing to sequence. She rode to the mine spur and found fresh hoofprints, wagon grooves, and powder grit near a tarp dump. 2 men on watch at the gate told her to turn around. One smelled like fear sweat under tobacco. You don't want to be here when shift changes, he said. You don't want to be here when that face slumps, she answered. He looked at the ground. On the way back, she passed families sleeping through open windows in the low blocks, trusting men in waistcoats because trusting mud maps felt foolish. At one porch, a father sat whittling and nodded to her like nothing in the world was urgent. Nice night, he said. Get your children to your sisters on Quarry Road, Amanda replied. He chuckled. For wolves, for water. He waved her on. Near the mission, she found Father Ortega testing the bell rope in the dark. Pull and release, jaw clenched. Good man. At the livery, two stable boys were quietly moving tack and feed uphill despite orders. Better men. At the sheriff's office, her office once, light burned inside. Through the slat gap, she saw Voss at the desk, her desk, boots up again, telling 3 committee members that if she comes with a mob tonight, we lock her as a disturber and be done. Amanda stepped back into shadow, breathing slow until anger thinned into usefulness. Then she went to work with hammer and nails. From her saddlebag, she took the first oilcloth packet, flattened it against the McReady mercantile door, and drove 2 10-penny nails clean through the top corners. The hammer blows cracked down the sleeping street like pistol shots. She moved to the next house and the next. On each packet, in block print, one line showed under lantern glare: "Red before dawn." Then climb. The hammer blows kept traveling after she moved on. Hard iron reports bouncing off adobe, waking dogs, waking babies, waking grudges. A shutter banged open above her. "Who's there?" "Read it," Amanda called without stopping. She nailed one packet to the schoolhouse door, one to Pike's counting room post, one to the side entrance of Crowder's warehouse where his teamsters clocked in, one to the assay office, one to Voss's own front gate. She did not choose by friendship. She chose by reach. Every third door she switched nail height so a drifting lantern would still catch paper, even if the bottom corners soaked. By 12:11 a.m., May 16, 1887, the air had dropped to 54 degrees and smelled of split stone. Lanterns began appearing up and down Copper Flat, little yellow eyes blinking open. People stepped out in drawers and shawls, ripped packets free and carried them under porch lamps. Then the night changed voices. Not mockery now. Sharp, startled reading. Names spoken twice. "This can't be right. That's my father's parcel number. Look at the lien date." A woman on Juniper Street screamed one long note and then started pounding on her neighbor's door. Amanda kept moving. At the McReady place, old Jonas McReady stood barefoot in the dust, paper shaking in his fist. "Pike took our south lot in '84, said taxes." His voice cracked into rage. "I paid those taxes. Bring your family to Route A now," Amanda said. "Argue ownership after sunrise." He stared at her, chest heaving. "You knew this?" "I knew enough to copy it. Move." He did. Others did not. At least not yet. Outside the saloon, 2 drunk drovers burned their packet in a whiskey tray and cheered when it curled black. 10 minutes later, they were still there, arguing over whether the signatures looked forged, while water hissed louder in the arroyo behind them. At 12:37 a.m., a low boom rolled down from the dam road, deeper than the earlier test pops, long enough to tremble window glass. Amanda stopped mid-street and counted her pulse against the echo. 1, 2, 3. A second boom answered, closer together. From St. Bridget's bell tower, Father Ortega leaned out and looked toward her, one hand already on the rope. She raised a palm. Not yet. The mission yard had become a rough staging ground. Blankets lay in heaps. Church girls filled buckets. Cora Bell stood on the steps with a chalk stub and a voice like a whip, checking names against Amanda's household list as families arrived. Some came with everything they owned, piled high in carts despite warnings. Amanda made them unload trunks and wardrobes where they stood. Take food, water, boots, blankets. Leave clocks and china. That was my mother's. Then honor your mother by living. By 1:05 a.m., the temperature had slipped to 51. The creek, lit by moon and scattered lamps, moved too fast to reflect. It looked like torn cloth dragged over knives. Amanda rode west to the dam spur with a green-lensed lantern tied low to her saddle horn and a coil of hemp rope across her shoulder. Halfway there, she met 3 men running downhill. mine laborers by their helmets, one with blood on his sleeve, one carrying no hat, one crossed with powder burns up his neck. "What blew?" she shouted. The burned man bent over, gasping. "Fuse train jumped. Kell said hold. Then somebody lit the wrong." He choked on mud and fear. There's a crack in the face. Whole side talking. "Where's Kell's?" No answer. Only wide eyes pointed uphill. She spurred past them. At the final bend, she saw it. The west shoulder of the private dam slick with seepage. Moonlight flashing on a new split line jagging down through masonry like lightning frozen in stone. Men were silhouettes against the crest, running without tools. One stumbled, rose, vanished behind spray. A wagon stood abandoned with 2 powder kegs still in back, one rolling and knocking against a wheel with each vibration. Amanda lifted the green lantern and swung it in a hard arc toward town. In the distance, St. Bridget's bell began to ring, not measured, wild. The first structural failure came at 3:43 a.m. It did not explode in a grand single break like stories told later. It sagged, spat, and then the compromised shoulder peeled away in chunks the size of rooms. Water punched through the seam, black and thick with silt, carrying ripped timbers and stone. The sound was not a roar at first. It was a grinding, as if the mountain clenched its teeth. Then the wall formed. Amanda wheeled her mare and rode downhill ahead of it, yelling before she reached the first homes. "Up! Now! Route A! Route B!" The bell hammered over everything. People poured from doors half-dressed, clutching babies, hymnals, lockboxes, bird cages. A cart overturned at the mission corner, spilling flour sacks that burst white in mud like smoke. Route B jammed when a panicked mule went down in the narrow cut. Men beat at it, lost footing, and slid. Amanda cut the traces with her knife and slapped the mule free. It lurched up and vanished uphill without the wagon. Her ditch at St. Bridget's took the first sidewash exactly as designed. Caught it, bent it north, bought perhaps 7 minutes for the row below. Then a full tree trunk hit the channel mouth and lodged crosswise. Water climbed, foamed, overtopped, and blasted through the mission fence. "Shovels!" she shouted. "Pry bar! Move that log!" Lin Wei and 2 boys were already there. They levered until the trunk rolled, surged away, and ripped one shovel from a boy's hands. At 3:58, the main surge struck downtown. Crowder's expanded feed warehouse, built fat on the drainage bend she had warned about, took the current broadside. Its new south wall bowed once and collapsed inward, spilling sacks and beams into a spinning eddy that redirected flow straight into Pike's bank cellar windows. The glass blew. The lower floor flooded in seconds, and ledger books floated out like pale fish before sinking under mud. The saloon porch tore off and sailed into a corral. Horses screamed high and terrible until somebody hacked the gate chain. Animals bolted through waist-deep water and up Route A, eyes white. The red markers low on fence posts vanished. The ones Amanda had nailed high to lintels stayed, flickering in lantern light like little wounds. People followed those. Plans failed by degree and still mattered. The livery back channel she had opened diverted enough to spare the schoolhouse steps. The schoolhouse became a triage point. The Cottonwood Bend cut worked for 12 minutes. Then the mayor's old berm remnant slumped and sent a backwash through worker cabins anyway. Her wagon barricade at Mill Lane held one branch of current long enough to get 15 children across, then broke and cartwheeled into darkness. At 4:07, as the cold dropped to 49 with meltwater spray, Boone Kells finally appeared, on horseback, hat gone, shouting that the mine office records had to be saved. 2 miners ignored him and hauled his horse by the bridle toward high ground, while his office, down by the spur, lifted from one corner and spun apart, board by board. "Leave it," Amanda yelled. Kells tried to wrench free. A floating beam struck his leg and swept horse and man sideways into a fence. They vanished behind debris and came up clinging to rails. Nobody cheered. Nobody helped him first. They were carrying children. For 53 minutes, the main force kept pounding the flats. By 4:36, the first crest had passed, but secondary torrents kept arriving through side arroyos and alley cuts, turning every street into a moving puzzle of wreckage. Lamps winked out as fuel got wet. Dawn had not broken. The world was all bell, shouting, and black water with white teeth. And then came the counting. At the schoolhouse landing, Amanda set up triage by lantern and voice. "Can you walk?" Up the stairs. "Bleeding bad?" "Left bench. Breathing trouble. Window side. Keep blankets dry as you can." Cora Bell ran names from the soaked ledger she kept under her apron. McCready, all 5. Ortega says 2 more from Laundry Row. Haskins twins missing. Doyle baby found. "Found where?" "In a feed trough," Cora said, and kept writing. People arrived in waves. Coughing children wrapped in wet quilts. Men carrying their mothers on doors ripped off hinges. Women with hands skinned raw from rope burn. Mud turned faces the same color until only eyes showed. The losses started coming in with names attached. Eli Bell, Cora's younger nephew, 19, who had dug ditches all day, was brought up at 4:22 on a shutter by his brother Tom. Eli had tied himself to the mission fence to pass children along the rope line. When the fence gave, the rope snapped back and slammed him under a beam. His chest had caved on one side. He was still warm when Amanda knelt, but his breath rattled once and stopped before she could finish binding. Cora looked at her nephew's face, touched his hair out of his eyes, and said in a flat voice, "Write him down later. We got living." She stood and went back to the stairs. At 4:31, Lynn Way stumbled in carrying little Rosa McCready, 7, both arms around his neck. Rosa was alive, shivering, her feet cut to ribbons. Behind him came his own worker, Bao Chin, not moving, caught under a laundry press cart that had slammed him against a wall when he doubled back for Rosa's grandmother. Bao had a jade thread bracelet on one wrist and a rent through his coat where the wood had taken him. Lin Wei set Rosa down first before he turned to Bao. He didn't cry. He just bowed his head once, briefly, then asked Amanda for another rope and went back out. At 4:44, they brought Tilson from the assay office district, face gray with creek silt, one hand still clenched around a tin cash box key. He had apparently run into his office after the bell, trying to drag records clear. The roof truss dropped. Miners pulled him free too late. Amanda recognized him by his cuffs, blue ink stains spreading in wet flower shapes. The same man who had signed the ledger transfer now lay on a schoolhouse floor, while the ledger that condemned his employers stayed dry in her saddlebag uphill. 3 dead in 22 minutes of counting, with more unaccounted. Desperation sharpened everyone. A mother tried to go back down for a sewing machine because it's all we have for work. 2 women physically held her till she stopped clawing. A ranch hand demanded whiskey for shock and got slapped by Father Ortega, then handed a blanket and put to hauling water. Children cried for missing dogs, missing dolls, missing fathers. Men who had called Amanda a fraud all week stood in a line passing the same bucket, silent, looking at her only when they needed instruction. Contrast sat everywhere you looked. Houses where packets had been read early were mostly empty now, doors swinging, families accounted for on the ridge. Houses where packets were burned still had people trapped on roofs waving lamps. The high-nailed route markers led clusters safely through alleys where low posts had disappeared. Streets without markers became whirlpools of indecision, people circling in the dark until someone shouted the way. Her preparations had not stopped catastrophe. They had turned chaos into narrower choices. and narrower choices into survivors. By 5:02 a.m., with a weak silver line just beginning behind the eastern ridge, cries rose from Lower Mill Lane. "Here! Help! Over here!" Amanda grabbed a pike pole and slid down the embankment with two miners. They found the Haskins twins wedged in the fork of a toppled cottonwood, one conscious, one limp. They hauled both out. The limp one coughed muddy water and came back screaming. Amanda took that sound like a gift. When she climbed back to the schoolhouse, soaked to the ribs and shaking from cold, she found a figure waiting at the top step. She would have sworn an hour earlier would die before asking her anything. Harlan Voss. His left arm hung wrong, shoulder blown out, face cut open from brow to jaw. Mud had turned his fine coat into a rag. He looked smaller without swagger. "Amanda," he said and nearly fell saying it. Two men moved as if to block him. She held up a hand. Voss swallowed hard, eyes refusing to settle on the dead laid out under blankets near the wall. Crowder's boy, Thomas. He's stuck in the drainage culvert by the old lime pit. Grate came down. Water's still running through. He sucked air through his teeth. I tried. Couldn't lift it one-handed. From below came another shout, farther now, fading. "He's here. He's still here." Voss's voice cracked on the last word. "Please." No title, no smirk, just please. Amanda did not ask him where her badge was, did not ask who fired at her hat, did not ask whether he had helped write the notice that called her unstable. She shoved a coil of line into his good hand. "Can you walk?" "If I have to." "You do. Cora, take stair command. Ortega, keep bell going every 2 minutes so we can orient and spray. Linway, with me if you've got legs left." Linway nodded once and lifted a crowbar. Amanda turned to Voss. "You speak clear and follow orders. If current takes me, you keep hold of that rope and haul whoever you can. Understand?" He met her eyes and, for the first time since she had known him, answered like a deputy. "Yes, Sheriff." She did not correct him. They went down together into the gray, toward the culvert roar and the trapped child's voice, while above them, Copper Flat, mud-broken, weeping and very much alive, kept climbing. The culvert mouth was a black throat under the old lime pit road, half choked with brush, fence rails, and a bent iron grate that had come loose on one side and wedged tight on the other. Water hammered through it hard enough to flatten a man. "Thomas!" Voss shouted, voice tearing. "Tommy, answer!" A thin, ragged cry came from inside the pipe. "Pa!" "Rope to me," Amanda said. Linway slid the coil into her hands. She tied one end around her waist, cinched twice, then looped the running end through Voss's good arm and around a stump root. "If I get pinned, don't yank wild," she said. "2 pulls means haul. 1 means hold." Voss nodded, jaw shaking. She and Linway dropped flat on their bellies at the culvert lip. The current threw spray in their faces like gravel. Inside, in lantern flicker, Amanda saw a small boot wedged between slats and a boy's hands, white-knuckled around rusted iron. "Thomas, look at me," she shouted. "You let go when I tell you, not before." He was maybe 10, eyes huge and mud-streaked face. "I can't, my leg." Linway jammed the crowbar under the grate corner. Metal screamed but didn't give. "Again," Amanda said. They heaved together. The corner rose an inch, then 2. Amanda shoved her left arm into the torrent up to shoulder, fingers searching blind, until she found Thomas's shin pinned under a twisted bar. "On 3, she said through clenched teeth. 1, 2, 3. Linway drove down on the bar. Amanda yanked the boy's leg free. Thomas lost his grip and slammed into her chest with the full force of water behind him. 2 pulls. The rope snapped taut. Voss roared and hauled, boots skidding in mud, dragging Amanda and Thomas back from the mouth, while Lin Wei scrambled clear with the crowbar. They tumbled hard against the bank. Thomas coughed once, then vomited creek water and started sobbing for his father. Voss fell to his knees beside him, one-handed, broken-shouldered, crying openly now. I got you, son." Amanda didn't watch long. She checked the boy's leg. Bad bruise, no obvious break. Then shoved both of them uphill. Schoolhouse now. Keep him warm and awake. As they climbed, the bell at St. Bridget's kept striking through the gray. By first full light, the water had dropped from murderous to mean. Streets were no longer rivers, but knee-deep channels of mud and wreckage. Smoke rose where people had managed small fires on stoops and rooftops. Every few minutes, someone shouted a name and waited for answer. At the schoolhouse landing, Amanda turned from rescue to survival. "Listen up," she called, standing on the top stair, voice hoarse but cutting through noise. "We are on ration and order till noon count. No one goes down alone. Buddy pairs only. Boil all water 10 minutes at rolling bubble. If you don't know what that looks like, ask before you drink." She sent Ortega and 2 older girls to establish a prayer hall that doubled as infirmary in the classroom. She put Cora Bell in charge of food tally because Cora did not scare easy and did not lie. Then Amanda rode for her father's line shack. She came back 2 hours later with both panniers stuffed and a travois dragging behind. Sacks of beans and cracked corn, lamp oil, spare blankets, candles wrapped in waxed cloth, nails, twine, 1 small keg of salt, and the seed grain she had brought to town when they laughed at her. The laughable things became currency. She split the hard biscuit into strict piles. Children first, then injured, then labor crews. She showed 3 boys how to build a rocket stove from broken brick and stovepipe so they could boil large pots on less fuel. She taught a cluster of women how to set drainage furrows around the schoolhouse foundation with shovel angle and hand-width spacing so runoff wouldn't rot the walls before nightfall. "Not straight down slope," she corrected, nudging 1 furrow with her boot. "Diagonal, so velocity bleeds off. Water's lazy and cruel. Give it an easier path than your floor." In the yard below, Pike's iron safe sat tipped on its side, half buried in silt, door sprung open by pressure and impact. Wet promissory notes clung to weeds like dead leaves. Across from it, Cora's porch, cheap pine, hand-nailed, patched 3 times, still stood because she had moved her nephews and slit the corral fence exactly where Amanda told her to. A red calico strip still fluttered from the lintel. Near noon, Lin Wei and his workers rigged a drying line for blankets between the school and chapel. Amanda handed them onion starts from her saddlebag. Lin lifted 1 brow. Now, she said. "Put them in boxes if you have to. Fresh greens beat scurvy and grief both." He almost smiled. "Sheriff plants onions in flood. Sheriff plans winter and spring." Word spread. People came asking not for pity but for instruction. How do we keep babies warm if blankets stay wet? Skin-to-skin undercoats, rotate every 20 minutes. What do we do with spoiled flour? Don't eat it. Dry what you can for paste or feed. Mark sacks with charcoal so nobody mistakes them. Where do we bury? Above seep line, 2 feet deeper than you think. By the time the sun climbed high and mean, Copper Flat had 3 fire stations, 2 latrine trenches, 1 casualty list, and a posted labor board under the school eave with names and tasks in Amanda's block hand. Expensive confidence had drowned. Modest preparation was feeding the town. They found Mayor Crowder near the wreck of his warehouse, wrapped in a horse blanket, limping, face ash pale. Banker Pike was cleaner but shaking, boots ruined, spectacles gone. Boone Kell sat on an upturned crate while a miner splinted his leg with a fence slat. None of them looked like men who had run anything. At 12:17 p.m., A dust plume rose on the north road. 4 riders came in at a controlled pace. 2 territorial deputies, 1 telegraph courier, and a federal marshal with a weathered face and a writ tube strapped to his saddle. Federal Marshal Deacon Hines, he announced at the schoolyard edge, sliding down and removing his hat. His gaze took in mud lines, triage benches, and Amanda standing with soaked sleeves rolled to her elbows. "Which one is Sheriff Preston?" She raised a hand. Hines nodded once, businesslike. "Received your wire in Santa Fe 3 days ago. Follow-up repeat from Las Vegas station at midnight marked urgent fraud and imminent hazard. Roads near washed, but we made time." Pike found his voice first. "Marshal, thank God. This woman has incited panic and—" Hines held up a palm without looking at him. "You can speak when asked." Amanda handed over her waxed packet, then 2 duplicates. Primary ledger seized with receipt, corroborating copies, witness marks, payment traces, and forged transfer chains. Original signatures in several hands. I recommend immediate hold on municipal records and bank assets pending review." Hines flipped through pages fast, eyes narrowing at notation marks. "Where's Assay Clerk Tilson?" Silence answered him. Ortega crossed himself. The marshal closed the packet gently. "Understood." He turned to the crowd, voice carrying. "By authority of federal warrant and territorial concurrence, Elias Crowder, Silas Pike, and Boone Kells are under arrest for conspiracy to defraud, falsification of land and tax records, bribery of public officials, and reckless endangerment resulting in loss of life." Miners surged forward anyway, mud-streaked and raging. One shouted, "No court! Hang Kells from the Cottonwood now." Another pointed at Pike. "My mother lost her ranch to your paper tricks." A rope appeared in someone's hand like it had been waiting all along. Amanda stepped between the prisoners and the crowd. "You want justice," she said, not shouting, but every head turned. "Then don't become the same kind of thief. Lynching steals the truth, steals the records, steals every widow's chance to get title back in lawful ink." "They'll buy a judge," someone yelled. "Not with triplicate copies already in federal hands and half this town as witnesses," she snapped. "You hang them now. Their lawyers say flood-washed evidence and mob-buried facts. You march them in chains, sign statements, and watch every stolen acre come back by law." The rope holder hesitated. Others looked at one another, breathing hard. Hines stepped up beside her. "Sheriff's right. Anybody interferes with lawful custody answers to me first, then territorial court." The line broke. Not calm, but enough. Crowder stared at Amanda, mud on his cheeks and disbelief in his eyes. "After what we did, you still—" "Keep walking," she said. As deputies bound wrists, Harlan Voss pushed through the edge of the crowd, left arm in a sling, Thomas pressed to his side. In his good hand, he held Amanda's star, bent at one point where it had been stepped on. He stopped in front of her, swallowed once, and held it out. "I took this," he said, loud enough for those nearest to hear. "No authority, no right. I lied in office, blocked warrants, and called truth hysteria. Folks can say what they like about me later. But this belongs on you if you'll have it." Amanda looked at him a long moment, then took the star. She pinned it back to her vest with steady fingers. "Get your shoulder set by a real doctor," she said. "Then report to Marshal Hines for statement." Voss nodded. "Yes, Sheriff." That evening, with the dead laid out under clean sheets in St. Bridget's and cook fires burning low, the town gathered on the ridge above the mudflats where Main Street had been. No platform, no fiddler, no whiskey tray. Just people in borrowed coats and work shirts stiff with dried silt, looking at the wreckage and at one another. Cora Bell started it without ceremony. "She told us," Cora said, standing with her hands red from labor and grief. We laughed. No one interrupted. Lin Wei spoke next, accent clipped and clear. She asked for ditch labor. Committee sent fines. We dug anyway. Some who mock now alive because of those cuts. Old Jonas McReady held up his packet, now wrinkled but readable. This paper has my father's land chain and Pike's false lien marks. Sheriff nailed it to my door while we slept. I burned her warning once. Then I read this one. If I hadn't, my grandbabies would be down there. He pointed to the dark, broken line of houses below, in the mud. A ranch wife Amanda recognized from the well stepped forward, eyes swollen. I turned my back on you yesterday. I told my girls not to speak to you because decent women don't argue with councilmen in public. She drew a breath that shuddered. Decency almost killed us. Murmurs rolled, agreement, shame, anger at themselves and others. Father Ortega lifted his lantern. Confession is not punishment. It is beginning. If we name what we did, perhaps we can choose better. Then Mayor Crowder's wife, Clara, came down the line carrying a folded coat and Thomas's muddy cap. Her husband had been ridden out in irons an hour before. She stopped in front of Amanda. I do not ask mercy for Elias, Clara said. Her voice was exhausted and iron both. I ask truth for my boy. You saved him. Harlan says you tied yourself to a flood rope after midnight and did not ask whose child he was. She held out the cap as if it were proof of debt. Thank you. Amanda inclined her head once. He breathed. That's what mattered. From the back, a miner shouted, "And what about us?" We called her Pine Wolf, witch, liar. She still dragged our fools out. Another answered, "Because she's better than this town." Amanda's jaw tightened. "No," she said, "because that's the job." Silence settled harder than shouting. Marshal Hines stood off to one side, listening while deputies guarded prisoners near the chapel wall. He did not interfere. This wasn't his part. One by one, people named what they had done. I cut down markers with my knife. I told the telegraph clerk to ignore her wire. I helped post the notice calling her unstable. I fired at her hat. The man who said it stared at his boots. I thought I was proving loyalty. You were proving stupidity, Cora said flatly, and a few grim laughs escaped. When the admission slowed, all eyes went back to Amanda. She did not step onto a crate. She stayed where she was, mud to her shins, star dull in lantern light. You want reckoning? She said. Good. Here it is. She pointed down toward the floodplain. Your bank had marble counters and iron bars. It failed in 10 minutes. Cora's porch had cheap nails and a woman who listens. It stood. Crowder's new warehouse sat where water has always turned. It broke first. A ditch cut with borrowed shovels saved 20 homes before it clogged. Red cloth and 10-penny nails moved children through dark, where men with titles offered speeches. She let that sit, then went on. You mocked preparation because it looked small. You trusted authority because it looked expensive. That is the whole lesson. No one argued. At dawn the next morning they met again, this time not to confess but to choose. Amanda nailed a fresh board to 2 fence posts above the school steps and wrote 4 headings. Titles. Shelter Waterworks. Stores under titles. She listed names of families with contested land and who held copies of proof. Under shelter, she marked widows first. Cora Bell, Mrs. Haskins, Bao Chen's kin in Laundry Row if reachable by telegram. Under waterworks, she drew 3 permanent channels and 1 overflow basin with rough dimensions. Under stores, she wrote, Communal grain shed, 2 key holders, monthly audit public. A man in a clean vest, one of Pike's former clerks, cleared his throat. Sheriff, if town asks you to remain in office, would you accept? Amanda set the chalk down. I'll serve, she said, on one condition. Name it. Dozens answered at once. That preparedness outranks pride. Every season we inspect channels, mark high routes, and publish stores. No council can bury risk reports. No committee can silence warnings because it bruises somebody's reputation. You laugh if you want. You still dig. Cora barked. I'll write that into town rules myself. Do, Amanda said, and add this. No one gets called unstable for bringing records. A murmur of assent moved through the crowd like wind through grass. She looked to Marshal Hines. I need temporary authority to seal surviving municipal records and convene witness statements by block. Hines tipped his hat. Granted, Sheriff Preston. I'll keep the accused in federal custody pending circuit court. You keep your town alive. She turned back to the board, then stopped standing. Pick a column. People moved. 3 years later, on a hot June afternoon, the mission bell rang once. Test signal, not alarm, and schoolchildren poured out with spades over their shoulders, laughing as they ran to the North Channel. Line up by station, called Rosa McReady, now 10. Feet scarred but quick, red ribbon tied around her braid. If you throw dirt in the wrong direction, sheriff will make you measure grade twice. Amanda, 30-ish and sunline now, stood beside the channel marker post with a brass thermometer and notebook. Voss, shoulder-heeled, crooked, quieter man, checked culvert grates with 2 deputies and no swagger. Linway supervised a crew reinforcing sidewalls with stone and lime, pausing only to correct a boy's shovel angle with patient precision. At the grain shed, Cora Bell unlocked one padlock while Father Ortega unlocked the second. Inventory was read aloud in the yard every first Saturday. Beans, corn, flour, lamp oil, salt, seed reserves. Anyone could listen. Anyone could challenge a number. Ink did not hide anymore. That evening in the rebuilt square, set 20 yards higher than the old one, Amanda handed Jonas McReady a new deed with federal seal and witness signatures. South lot restored, she said. Jonas took it with both hands, then looked up. My father used to say paper is for bankers. Guess he never met the right sheriff. Paper's for memory, Amanda said. People forget when weather turns fair. 9 years after the flood, the courthouse wall held a framed map titled Copper Flat Flood Routes and Public Channels, revised 1896. In one corner, in tiny script, were the names Eli Bell, Bouchin, Edwin Tilson. On Founders' Day that year, someone proposed naming the new bridge after Mayor Crowder's grandfather. The motion died when Rosa, now a schoolteacher in a plain blue dress, stood and asked, which founder? The one who built low and stole high, or the ones who dug in mud at midnight? The bridge was named Bell-Chin Crossing. At the dedication, Amanda did not give the main speech. She stood back with hat in hand, while children from every block tied red cloth strips to the railing and then removed them again, practice for emergencies. A visiting merchant whispered to a local amused, "They still play at flood drills in drought?" The local, a former drover who once called Amanda Pine Wolf Girl, answered without smiling, "We don't play." In 1908, a young deputy from Albuquerque arrived to study Copper Flat's record system after flash floods hit his district. He expected grand engineering and found instead shelves of copybooks, pinprick codes in corners, public ledgers with signatures, and a sheriff's office where weather notes sat beside arrest warrants. Amanda, hair touched with gray at the temples, voice unchanged, set a waxed packet on the desk. "Triplicate everything," she told him. "One for office, one for mission, one cached outside town. Assume one building burns, one clerk lies, and one road washes out." He blinked. "That seems pessimistic." "It's survival," she said. "Pessimism quits. Preparedness works." Before he left, he asked if the story was true. that she had once been run out of town by Sundown and came back to nail evidence on every door. From the corner, old Cora, mending a grain sack by the stove, snorted. True enough, left out the part where half us were fools. Amanda capped her ink bottle. "Put this in your notes," she said to the deputy. "If the person warning you has mud on their boots and records in their hand, listen before the river votes." When Amanda Preston finally retired, Copper Flat did not carve her in marble. They did something she would have trusted more. They kept the drills. Every spring the bell rope was checked for fray. Children walked Route A and Route B by lantern at dusk. The grain shed was counted aloud. Channel grades were measured in inches, argued over, corrected. New families were handed two things on arrival: a welcome loaf and a printed map with high ground marks in red. And on the inside of the sheriff's office door, preserved under glass, hung one of the original oilcloth packets she had nailed up in the dark. The nail holes rust-ringed at the corners. The line across it was still legible. "Read before dawn. Then climb."